So, so I wanted to ask you about your Bitcoin journey. I think about a year ago, I think is when the first time you started talking about it publicly. You mentioned you had read the article by Alan Farrington, Bitcoin is Venice. And then you followed up with in-depth conversations with several prominent Bitcoiners, Robert Breedlove, Seyfedin Amos, and then you ventured deeper even into Austrian economics. And so I was curious to ask you, I assume that before that, at some point, Bitcoin came on your radar somehow. And I'm curious, what was that initial impression like for you? And when was that?
Well, I think the same thing applies to my desire to understand Bitcoin as applied to my desire to understand the business world, which is the best way to understand something is to jump into it in some sense feet first, because there's no substitute for the real thing, or there's no valid substitute for the real thing. And, I try to stay on the technological edge insofar as at my advanced age, I'm capable of that, which is, decreasingly the case. And the Bitcoin phenomena attracted my attention for a couple of reasons. One was partly because the story of its development is so unbelievable that it sounds like a fairy tale, right? It's so strange, you can't believe it's true. But it seems to be true insofar as anybody can tell. And so that attracted my attention right away. But then the idea of a decentralized monetary system, well, that is a revolutionary idea. And the more I thought about it, and it actually, it makes me wary, which is something we could talk about. I mean, one of the lovely things about cash is that it is a decentralized monetary system in large part. It's not that easy to track cash. Thank God, because you could be bloody certain that if it was possible to track cash, that every agency with some ethical notion, any ethical notion whatsoever, would be tracking absolutely everything you ever purchased, trying to nudge and tap and compel you into making the decisions they regarded as ethical. And that would be fine if they were right, but they won't be. And so that's a big problem. Yeah, well, I mean that technically too, because the reason they won't be right is because you actually can't make those presumptions a priori. One of the fundamental axioms in some sense of a free market system is that the only way to properly compute the value of the emerging horizon of the future is by sampling and perhaps summing the free choice of a multitude of free agents. That's actually the only way you can do it. There is no central planning way, even in principle, that can substitute for that. And I believe that that's true for a whole variety of reasons, some of which are psychological. We can't compute the future algorithmically from the past. And so we have to use mechanisms other than deterministic algorithm to plot our way forward. And part of the way we do that is by using the entire economic system as a massive computational device that uses the array of choices that everyone makes as the mechanism that values new things as they emerge. Now, central planning types, they think they can just jump over that and say, well, no, we need to save the planet, let's say. That's the ESG monsters are on beating that drum at the moment. And so they think they can subordinate that computational mechanism to some sort of ethical or procedural algorithm. And I think that's complete bloody nonsense. And worse than that, I think it's extremely dangerous, because I think all the evidence, especially from the 20th century, suggests very strongly that as soon as you subordinate free market mechanisms to central planning ethical dogmas, you catastrophically affect the economic system in a detrimental manner, but you destabilize the entire society and tilt it towards totalitarianism. And we haven't learned that yet, because there's always a new generation of people that think they're smart enough to plan the world. And Bitcoin, in principle, stops that from happening, right, by decentralizing it.